Welcome to our Making of Loki panel. Today we are joined by director and executive producer Aaron Benson, production designer, director, and writer Kasra Farahani, writer and executive producer Eric Martin, director and executive producer Justin Moorhead, visual effects supervisor Christopher Townsend, and costume designer Christine Wada. I think I got everyone here. Thank you all for being here. Eric, I'll start with you. I know talks for a second season started during production of season one, and I've heard you describe the two seasons as one whole book. So what were your initial ideas for a second season, and how did it evolve into what we eventually got?
The big idea for season two started with just like taking Loki from a lowercase g god to a capital G god, and it was always going to be that journey that like let's level him up, but do it in a way where he's going to get that thing he's always wanted, but it's not going to be that thing anymore. He's going to have found something else and make it that sacrifice.
Mhm. And you wrote every episode this season as well.
I wrote on every episode.
Yeah.
I Kasra, that fine gentleman here, the co-writer on episode three with his partner Jason, and then Catherine Blair co-wrote episode four.
Mhm. Well, Justin and Aaron, you guys have worked on Moon Knight, and then you guys came aboard Loki season two. So what excited you about joining the season?
The when we were working on a tiny bit of additional photography when our paths were able to cross with Kevin Feige. And that was when he asked us if we wanted to do Loki season two, and he said this thing that really stuck with us when we held him to task for it, which was, well, we've never done a season two before. This would be the first season two of any Disney Plus show. And there's no reason to do it if we don't do it completely differently, if we have nothing new to say. And that really excited us. We loved season one, but part of our independent film upbringing has been kind of, you know, going left when people go right a lot of the time. And so it really excited us that we were able to reinvent a lot of the visual language in terms of the camera and the lighting and all of that. Obviously, we were still following in the footstep. Eric worked on season one. Kasra was still our production designer, and we had a lot of the same team around us, so it still felt like Loki. But we had a lot of license to go and play around rather than it being some kind of like a strict, train on the tracks.
Mhm. Justin, do you have anything to add?
Oh no, I would just be repeating what he said.
He says it so much better, right?
Yeah, exactly. And it's loud here. Just gonna have to do all the talking.
Mhm. Well, I do want to discuss like the pre-production because I'm sure it was so elaborate and detailed, and like Aaron said, you have familiar faces from season one, including Christine. So let's start with that, the costumes. And I know in season one you wanted to strip Loki of what was familiar to him, and he wore a lot of like middle management type of costumes. And so what were your ideas for season two? Like he has a new very nice coat for most of the season this time.
Right. Well, I think it was bringing back some of the God aspect to Loki, bringing back sort of his superpowers in the beginning to then have a arc for him to get humble again. I think there's a lot in this second season that's about these humble relationships. And so it allowed us to have this great arc with his character.
Well, you have new costumes too, like for Obi, that jumpsuit, and then obviously the McDonald's outfit for Sylvie. So what went into designing those?
Right. Well, it was tricky with all this time travel because it had to stay in line and not to be so jolting to the overall story. So it was Obi still lives in this world of the mid-century tone, but Kasra had this great idea to sort of backdate it a little bit more through use of palette, but it still, I think, lived in the world of the TVA, which had more of that 40s 50s instead of the 60s, 70s pops of the oranges and the browns. We kind of went cool tone. So that was a fun way to mix it up, but still stay in the visual language of the show. But I think period wise, we're really interested in keeping sticking to a real reality as much as we could, so that it didn't feel like hokey time travel, and that there's so much of the show that I think lives in the camera and is very practical, and it makes Loki special. And so to make it campy and overly stylized felt wrong. And I think it was really it was helpful to have production design and directors and visual effects, by the way, that all were trying to achieve that same sort of purpose, to keep it grounded.
Well, Kasra, you pulled triple duty this season. You returned as a production designer. So let's talk about that first. Like Christine said, like you wanted to backdate a lot of the newer sets, like Obi's workplace and the temporal loom, and you do really get that feel of it. It feels colder and more retro than like the orange glow of a lot of the TV from season 1. So what were your inspirations for these new sets?
Yeah, I mean, I think from some of the earliest conversations with Eric and Kevin Wright, who was one of the EPs on the job, like we talked about wanting to see more of the TVA beyond what we saw in season 1, which this dovetailed nicely into what Justin and Aaron wanted to do, which is like bring new things to the table for the second season. And so a lot of the story ended up kind of taking place on what we sort of imagined as this like systems level, or like think of it as the foundation of the TVA. If what we saw in season 1 is the house, a lot of what we spend our time in season 2 is the foundation of the house, and it's like the temporal core, which is essentially the kind of the heart of the TVA, and Obi's workshop, the RNA, which is the kind of circulatory system of the TVA, keeps information moving and keeps repairs happening, keeps things on wheels. And so the thought was that those parts of the TVA would have necessarily had to have been built first. And so it made sense that if the kind of predominant look of the first season was kind of inspired by a mid-60s look, that the systems level might take on a more kind of Cold War era palette and architectural vernacular. Also, it wanted to feel sort of more like the basement, and that's reflected in the weight of the architectural choices and the materials that we're using. And so, yeah, hopefully it feels still part of the TVA and related, but a kind of cruder and earlier version of the TVA.
Yeah, that has not been renovated at all.
Yeah.
Well, and yeah, you were a co-writer and you directed the 3rd episode. So how did this come about? And Eric, feel free to weigh in as well.
Well, it was just awesome. I mean, Eric very kindly invited me very early on into the writer's room, which was an awesome opportunity, and it was really fun to be able to expand into that role, and while also being able to interface with the design of the project, that was able to contribute in the writing in a way that had a kind of a feedback loop to the visuals of the story and what these settings are, and so it just worked out really great, and it was a joy to do that. And then in terms of the directing, yeah, it was an awesome opportunity that also came across my plate. And the episode that I ended up getting, which was the 3rd, I was delighted to do that one, but it sort of was happenstance that I got that one because my design duties sort of kept me busy, too busy to be doing any directing until the last episode of the season that fell in our schedule. And that happened to be the 3rd episode that we shot at the end of the schedule. And I'm really grateful that it was, because 2 or 3 was just a super fun opportunity to get sort of out of the TVA and build out a piece of, I don't know, piece of the Loki world that we hadn't seen, and was hopefully a little bit more unique for as it relates to what you see in Marvel films and projects. You know.
Yeah, it's the Chicago's World's Fair, and I feel like those sets felt so much more grander than the regular, you know, the TVA and the normal Loki sets. So what was it like designing those? Because it feels like, you know, the scale is just a big undertaking.
You know what? The sets were a really good size, and we did build a nice chunk of the midway. But I think so much of that scope has to be credited to what Chris Townsend's team did to really build out from what is a comparatively small piece of the World's Fair and make it feel like the World's Fair, which is one of the hugest kind of undertakings of that era. I think the visual effects are impeccable, and thanks also to Isaac, our DP, the line between the in-camera work and the visual effects is, I think, imperceptible even to pretty critical eyes. I think also it's worth mentioning that the sound people were so effective at making the world seem much larger than just what we were able to even capture in the frame.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, I love like one of the visual languages of this season is just threads and strands. Like Aaron mentioned, we have this spaghettification, and obviously in the finale, Loki is holding together all the branches. So, Chris, let's start with you. Like, what were the conversations like for the visual effects, and how did those looks develop for the spaghetti and the timeline branches?
Yeah, I mean, it was very interesting as a show, as a project, from a visual effects point of view, because one of the things that Aaron and Justin and Kasra and everyone on the team creatively were really into was this sort of lo-fi look, and maintaining a very, we talk about grounded in visual effects an awful lot, but it was a very analog feel is what we wanted. We had this joke that we were Team No Glow, as so much of visual effects that we see is very glowy. And so we strived to try and, you know, reduce that sort of relying on those kind of effects and those looks as much as possible, and keeping it very tangible, and always thinking about that making things feel physical. As you say, in the last episode, which is quite bombastic in its style and theatrical and very dramatic, we pushed the limits of that. Necessarily but we was also felt that it was sort of an earned moment within the series, that we could do that. But generally, I think we, from a visual effects point of view, were leaning very heavily into what Kasra had designed, what Isaac had lit, and what had been conceived from a sort of a creative point of view. And so we were able to sort of use, you know, Kasra's mentioned that the sets, you know, that we did an awful lot of work on the set, particularly for Chicago, but it was still a massive set. I mean, it was a you know, on the back lot in London, we were, you know, it was this massively ornate set that was beautifully built, and so our job was to expand. But really, we had such a great grounding, and I think that sort of, you know, from a physical set point of view was brilliant to have as sort of a starting point.
Yeah, sure. Well, like Eric, Aaron, Justin, what was your reaction when you saw like the final effects come together for these spaghetti strands and the branches?
You know, I'll just say, in the scripts, spaghettification was this thing we came to early on, and it was kind of this funny idea that, like, okay, well, that's what happens when you go into a black hole, like everything gets spaghettified. And Justin and Aaron saw that, and they just ran with it, and it was so fun to see them take this thing that was like almost a joke, and then spin it into very much the look of everything. So, I mean, it was just terribly exciting to see them grow what was like a small seed on the page into that.
Those are the best ideas, right? When it starts as a joke and then it becomes real.
Yeah, we realized just with that one word, spaghettification, you know, it of course made this amazing image in our minds. But we realized that we had, the idea of someone or something turning into spaghetti looks just like all of the threads of time that we wanted, going back to what Chris said, where we wanted it to feel physical, like you could reach out and grab it, which ended up happening in episode 6, not like a glowing bit of light that your hand would pass through. And so it was like, well, we thought, okay, well, that's the same visual language, just almost by coincidence. People just turning into, non-existent threads of time and withering away. And then also considering one of the major themes and lessons that Loki's learning is about, that it's not at all about the what you do, it's about the who you do it with. And his, this former antagonist becoming, somebody who all that matters to him is the people he surrounds himself with. And so threads or strands connect us in that way. And so it became once again, a third way to interpret this like stringy visual motif.
Yeah, because it's nice because like on one side everything is fraying and the other is like it's coming together with him at the end of time. So well, my favorite plot twist this season was the heel turn by Miss Minutes, because I did not see that coming and I love it. So I guess like Eric, like, can you talk about the choice to give this diabolical inner life to Miss Minutes? Like, she was promised a body and she's in love with He Who Remains.
Yeah, that was something that excited me going into season 2. If we were going to have this virtual AI character that's just kind of this throwaway character early on in the season, in season 1, and then we see her pop up at the end of season 1, and it's like, oh, well, she's very protective of him. What is that? I wanted to dig further into that and make her a real character. If we're looking at artificial intelligence as this growing phenomenon, and as these things become more and more intelligent, like what does it mean if they actually have like basic emotions? And what does that look like if she spent, countless millennia with this one person at the end of time? Well, they have a pretty strong bond. And so let's see that play out. And so I wanted to get to kind of a strange, odd place with her and like take that as far as we absolutely could. I really never expected Marvel to allow us to go as far as we did with it. But they kept not saying no, and we just got down the line and it stayed in there. I was really amazed.
Was this another joke that just started as a joke, or because it seems like you gave it thought, or
Oh, no,
you
it was
just
definitely not a
expected
joke.
you just expected them to say no.
Yeah. I expected it to be a little bit too weird.
Mhm.
That they'd be like, people would be a little creeped out that she wants to have this body at the end of 203, and that there's this like awkward energy in that room. And I know like it wasn't the easiest for everybody to swallow, but I think it ultimately made such sense to the character and to the story that it went through. But it was never a joke. Like, I wanted her to be a real legitimate character. I wanted to treat her as if she was just another one of our wonderful characters that we're exploring, and like, let's dig as deep as we can, because it just feels surprising and odd and just kind of right for our show.
Yeah, and I think that's ultimately why it works, because it is kind of surprising at first when it first happens in 3, and I'm like, this actually makes a lot of sense, especially with like how she was developed and created in the TVA. And then it's also fun at the end to see her rebooted by Obi as well, to see what's going to happen with her now. Well, Chris, what was the visual effects like for Miss Minutes? Because in the 3rd episode, we also get giant Miss Minutes.
Yeah, it was really fun, actually. We wanted to take them. I think Miss Minutes was very successful in the first season, but we wanted to try and make her, going back into this sort of lo-fi world, as sort of as a refinement, we wanted to take her a little bit more hand animated. So we went a slightly different technique in sort of the visual effects way. So there's a little bit more of a moments, particularly where we go into that sort of more classic animation, sort of Disney animation stuff. And we harken back to sort of, animations from the 30s and 40s and particularly for the black and white minutes that we see in episode 3. And that was really exciting to sort of be able to develop the character there. And then when she, you know, she brings her color back in, and then she professes her love, and all these sort of things happen. I mean, it's a pretty crazy journey that she goes on. So it was a really fun character to work with, and trying to find a way to, again, make her feel like she's very much part of the world, and that she exists there, and that she's, again, a tangible thing that everyone is relating to. And even though, you know, He Who Remains, or Timely, sort of refers to her as I'm trying to think, Eric, the description of her as this magic sort of clock thing.
The ghost clock.
The ghost clock, yes, the ghost clock, and the way
that was all you, Kasra, I think, right? You
Sorry?
came up with ghost clock.
It was in the papers. Ghost clock.
It was in the paper.
Yeah.
So it must be real. But yeah, so I think it was really fun to be able to play around with how far can you push, how big can she get, and we were thinking of, you know, movies like Ghostbusters and the Marshmallow Man and that sort of, you know, lumbering sort of character. So it was really fun to sort of relate to those types of worlds, but still maintaining her character. And that, I think, you know, written on the page of what, you know, Eric and the team did, and then what Tara, the voice actor who plays her, everyone sort of bringing that consistency. And so how do you still make that work when you're making her black and white, you're making her color, you're making her blush, you're trying to give her a body, you're trying to, you know, making her this massive ghost clock. All those sort of challenges makes the job really fun, of trying to create a sort of a unified character that sort of works still. So yeah, and also having interaction with things. So that's the other thing that we did quite a bit of. You know, there's little moments where in the World's Fair she touches the bunting and they float down because she breaks through as the ghost clock, or she's standing on something and some paper moves, and it's these little things to try and make her feel more physical and real.
Mm-hmm. My favorite is in the finale during the montage when they're trying to fix the multiplier, and Loki comes in and asks her for help, and she just blinks. Like,
and it's really, it's, you know, from an animation point of view, it's how do you make it, you want to have minimal, you know, it's going back to sort of classic animation of trying to find the very smallest way to tell the story, and it's a very fine line between it being dead or being deadpan, and being, you know, and working really well. And I think that is something that, you know, we worked very hard at, and everyone had very strong opinions on exactly, you know, should she be tapping her foot? Should she be stationary? Should she be blinking twice? Should she smile? You know, and we tried lots of different things to try and find the right tone.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, we have to talk about the finale. Obviously, I think this is one of the best finales ever. I'm not being hyperbolic, but you know, this is the last time we see Loki. I think this is a perfect ending for him. It's so bittersweet and melancholy, and a great arc for the character. This selfish person making a selfless choice for his friends. And so, Eric, like, what were your conversations like with Tom Hiddleston about, you know, essentially concluding Loki's journey, and he's finding his glorious purpose and getting the throne, but perhaps not in the way that he had always imagined?
Well, you know, early on, you know, as I was telling kind of Tom, the direction of it kind of pulled me aside. It's like, okay, well, don't hold back. Just make sure, you know, just go as far as you can. Whatever you put on there, I can sell it. I'm like, yeah, Tom, I know. Like, I know you can do that. Like, that's why we're doing this, because you can sell whatever we're going to do here. But really, it was all about building to that sacrifice, and doing it in a way that felt, I think, both surprising, but also inevitable. And really, it's starting that story from the smallest emotional beat possible, and looking at like what drives Loki. And so the journey toward that really started with like Loki feeling like a bit of a spare part. His whole background led him into where he is, and feeling like, well, he didn't really have his place. When he found out, you know, he was not, that he was, you know, essentially adopted, that's something that kind of always stuck with him. And obviously we saw how that reverberated out through the MCU. But even now, where he's kind of changed his stripes, it's still there. And what's happened across our show is, well, Loki's kind of found his home. He's found his place. He's found his people. And so this was all building toward, well, this is where exactly he wants to be, but he cares about these people so much. And he knows that the only way they can all be together is if he's on the outside holding everything together. So it was just getting him to that place of making this sacrifice and sacrificing the exact thing that he wants so that everyone else can have their lives. And then you finally give him that throne, the thing that he used to want, and now it's more of a burden than a glory.
Yeah. Well, he definitely did sell it, and I love that final shot. Justin, I'll start with you this time. What was it like directing Tom in that final scene?
I mean, it's, you know, my memory of it is just us just basically being guests with all these wonderful collaborators. I mean, us coming as directors on season 2, so much of the big stuff's already in place, and we're working with an amazing actor who's been playing this character for God, how many years, guys? Was it 15 years by the time we got to it, or am I low? Is that low?
Like 14 now or something, right?
Yeah.
I don't know, it's
I mean,
crazy.
the first Thor was 2011, so
2011 we were shooting. Yeah. So, but yeah, I mean, it was a huge privilege to get to work with such an amazing actor, and he's like the library of Loki. The guy's like, ask him anything about that character, obviously.
I know about Loki School. He held
Yeah.
Loki School in season 1.
You know what's, it's wild too, because it's like on the one hand, it's like, well, you know, he's been playing the character, he should have the answers. But on the other hand, like, I can't remember what I was doing 12 years ago. And ask me to tell you about like a little like an acting gig I did 12 years ago. I won't remember, probably won't remember the character's name. He totally remembered the character's name.
He knows lines. I've seen him
Yeah.
recite lines from like 15 years ago. Yeah. Well, Christina, I want to talk about Loki's costume in that final scene, because it's unlike his previous Loki garb, which was so ornate and detailed, and this one was just really low-key and modest. It was just like, it felt like a large cloth. So what went into the design for that?
Sure. So designing it, I think the number one goal was to achieve this organic feeling to that costume, so that it really rung home the idea of him becoming more humble. And it really, it couldn't be like armor. I think we'd always seen Loki through all his stages kind of present armor at certain final stages of his arcs in all these stories. So it was really important that it felt godly, but not egomaniacal, and that it felt organic, but like a king's robe. And so there was a lot of cueing, and also there, I have to say, just from a completely practical level, I was really excited by the idea of trying to make that cape work without on it through the wind machines on its own, and not all solely through visual effects. So there was some real like construction practical challenge for me there, which I think when you have an actor like Tom, he really knows how to work that material. So there's a lot of help in designing that final costume from an actor like Tom, because he will know how to work those materials. He'll know how to work that costume, which is kind of shocking, because really he's always worn a lot of armor, really heavy costumes. And this was kind of the first time. And if I really think about the characters he's played across the board, it's the first time where he has really just worn this very loose, flowy fabric. And I think he really sold what it needed.
Yeah, it felt like he was finally comfortable in who he was and accepting like this was his purpose. Like he has to, yeah.
And I think there was like all this conversation about shoe, because we were landing on his feet a lot, walking up those steps, and it felt really important that we finally saw his skin, So it was a real choice to not have him wear a boot or a sock, but to just be in somewhat of a humble slipper and actually see some skin.
Mhm. Yeah. Well, I talked to Sophia DiMartino, and she doesn't think Loki will be at the end of time forever holding the branches. So she thinks he'll get fed up eventually and cause some mischief somehow. So I would love to hear all of your takes. Like, what do you think? Like, do you think Loki will stay there forever?
Leave Loki alone. Let him stay on his sad throne.
He needs to think about all the bad things he's done in life, and he
Yeah.
needs to come to terms with it.
Hmm.
I'm 1,000% certain he's going to be there forever.
Okay. We got 3 forevers.
I mean, it's a
Yeah,
lot.
add
It's a
one-
big job. It's a big
Yeah.
knot of time strands. Somebody's got to hold them.
Yeah, somebody's got to sit on that throne. I'd love to see him stay there,
Mhm.
but he is the god of mischief.
What if he finds someone to take his place?
Mm,
No, leave him there.
Leave him there? Christine, you too, forever?
he's arrived.
I just don't want to undo all of Eric's very hard work getting him there, you know?
That's true, yeah. Again, perfect ending, so.
We're gonna get so many angry tweets from people saying we hate Loki for leaving him on the throne forever.
And they'll all stand Sophia for being like, he'll leave, more Loki, so. Finally, before we wrap, I would love to know, what is your go-to McDonald's order? Speaking of Sylvie here.
Actually, never been to McDonald's.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow. Are you like a Burger King, Wendy's person or something?
No,
No
just
fast food?
yeah, I guess eccentric parents didn't want me to have fast food. Weird one. Yeah.
Okay. Anyone else has never been to McDonald's, or when was the last time you've gone?
It's my guilty road trip pleasure. It's always it's the thing that we allow ourselves when we go on a road trip. It's like you got to go into McDonald's and get a sausage McMuffin, and that's I think the rare occasion, but a very enjoyed one.
Soft serve cone for me.
Nice. Yeah.
Aaron, you have a good McDonald's story, right?
My one from a couple days ago?
Yeah.
I don't remember telling you that.
What happened?
Yeah. Okay. So I went to see a movie, and there were just like these greasy, like delicious looking fast food burgers all over. It was like a movie from the 70s. And I just saw it and I was like, I am absolutely dying for one of those hamburgers. And for probably the first time in like a decade, I went and I got a McDouble and a spicy McChicken from McDonald's at like midnight. And
Nice.
it was great. Was that the story? I didn't even remember telling you that.
Do you have another McDonald's story?
No, I know you're like a huge McDonald's fan, but I didn't know if it was like a recent.
I'm gonna kill you. Yeah, for the first time in a decade. Yeah, but my fandom, it just stays at a distance.
Mm-hmm.
I want to know if anybody's had a McRib. That's all I
I
want to
have
know.
not. I have not done that. No.
Okay, good.
I'm assuming you
Wait,
have.
nobody ever has had a McRib on this? Come on, I've had a McRib.
You
I
have?
haven't had a
What's
McDonald's.
what's a McRib?
I haven't. Yeah, I've been curious though.
Mm-hmm.
It's-
Well, what's
yeah.
your go-to order, Eric?
Well, mine's the soft serve.
Yeah.
cone.
Oh yeah, the soft serve.
Yeah.
Kasra.
Yeah.
Same thing.
You know what? It's not in high rotation, but I'd say the French fries there are pretty hard to argue with. They're pretty good.
My friend prefers the fries there too, to like Wendy's fries. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Well, Christine, how about you? Not the McRib.
Not the McRib. I'm definitely a French fry person. And every once in a while I want that breakfast hash brown. I guess I'm just a potato person.
That's a good one. Yeah, their hash browns are really good.
Mhm.
Mhm. I've been there late at like the drive-thru, and sometimes they're like, we don't have those anymore. Like,
Oh.
Yeah.
What?
Wow. So they just stop carrying stuff sometimes.
I think like they were just too frozen. Like they haven't been defrosted, so they were like, we
Oh.
can't serve them anymore. It's like 11 p.m. So yeah, I don't know.
I like the idea that they're too frozen. Like
Too
they're like
frozen, and
near
they
absolute
can't-
zero. That's how they get them there, and they survive forever.
Yeah. So, well, it was great speaking with you guys, and I'll just show you something really gross right now. I have the Loki branded sweet and sour sauce from August. There we go. We'll keep these forever. So thank you so much. It was great speaking with all of you.
Oh, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Have a good day.
Thanks a
Thanks.
lot. Bye.